you concerned with the turnovers still? I know last year it was, I think what we all talked about is they don't take care of the basketball. Are you still concerned with turnovers with this team going forward?
Yes. Um, if they had not had that Cleveland game where it was completely out of control, I would say I'd be slightly less concerned. But it's the thing of I really need to see it before I can really say something about it in terms of improving. Because I Cade has the ball in his hands so much, right? Like he is one of the highest usage players in the entire NBA. With that being said, he is, and I think you and I can agree on this, a highly talented basketball player who I think we both think will be on the all-star trajectory this year. And I think, in my opinion, he'll be there for many years. With that being said, we can blame the usage. We can blame, spacing like we did last season. He needs to get a tighter handle moving forward, and a tight and I think more than the tighter handle, sometimes he just makes passes that are just too like loose. Like he's it's like these are like easy mental mistakes that are happening, and I think that's like an easy fix for Cade. It's just and the usage I guess does play a factor there, but at the same time, he's got to be better when it comes to the turnovers. Just point blank period. That's how it is. Like, and I'm sure like he'll tell you that, right? Like he'll tell you that he needs to get better with the turnovers. His camp would probably tell you that again. That's something that needs to get cleaned up. So that's something where if Cade wants to be that, end up being a top 5, top 10 player in the NBA, that's going to have to be something, that really improves before, like he takes that very next step. Because right now, you're taking that step towards the all-star trajectory. When you want to take that step towards like all NBA, like, first team all NBA, like getting on those Olympic teams, that's when you really need to work on cutting down on the turnovers. Cause like, you just can't have that. Ivy overall, I don't think has had nearly as many turnovers that were forced or head scratching like they were last year. And I think part of that is just having more of a defined role. So my concern on him is a lot less than it was last year when it comes to turning the ball over. I feel like last year, whenever he had the ball, there wasn't really a focus. So a lot of times it seemed like he had to improvise. And I think when we talk about control, like, he would drive to the basket without much control or much of a plan, and you could tell, right? Because then he gets to the basket, and you can tell he's like, "Oh, I don't know if I really want to take this layup," but Duran's standing on the block right next to me, midair. I'm going to just go and throw it to him, and then it gets intercepted by a defender. So it's a thing of like I'm concerned, but I'm not nearly as concerned as I have been. I think it's something that absolutely needs to get cut down as a whole. Because you cannot have games like Cleveland if you are trying to be competitive and if you're trying to. I don't know if they'll come out and outright say this, but like, I mean, obviously, I think they want to be competing for a play-in spot this year. Like, I don't think that's really much of a secret. If that's something you want to do, if you want to be competing with like Charlotte and Toronto, and maybe Chicago, who knows, or Atlanta with, like the bottom of the East for that, 9-10 seed, you have to really clean up the turnovers. And that's also something that again, like Tobias, like that's something I've seen from him as well, where like there's been a couple ones where I was like, I don't know about that. Right. Like, it's just, I don't know. I think as time goes on, this should be something with the fouls, because these are all like, we talk about mental mistakes. These are all mental mistakes that happen when you have a young team. It really just, and it seems unfair, but you really have to look at the veterans for help on these types of things, where it's like, if the young guys start getting out of control, they can control the pace. Similar to the whole closing thing, like, obviously, like if an Ivy isn't ready to close a game yet, that's what you bring in a Malik Beasley for. It's just a thing of gelling together and really kind of smoothing these things out. I have more confidence in it getting smoothed out this year, though.
Yeah, same here. I think some of Cade's turnovers are just kind of like, you can tell as soon as the ball is turned over, he's like, shit. Some of the passes, like he tries to sneak it in between like two defenders. Like, great if he makes the play, but like 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to end up a turnover. And I think that's a case where even Tobias said it. Like when he had that 30-point outburst against Cleveland. It's just like, yeah, like great game offensively, but even like the turnovers, he's like, he'll watch the film, he'll break it down to see where he can get better. I thought night and day between the Cavs and the Celtics game. They did clean up the ball in terms of turnovers. Obviously, they were, I think, in the double digits again, but it wasn't 20. I think overall they'll get better, but it kind of seems like when you have a young team like the Pistons and your primary ball handlers are both guys that are extremely young, like Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham, you're probably going to have to live with them turning the ball over. I mean, if you can have Cade like under maybe 2.5 to 3 a game, you live with it, I think. Because you look at guys like Trae Young, who are high usage guards, and he turns the ball over a lot. Same with like a player like LaMelo Ball. Like he has high turnovers, and I guess it's this kind of like you have to pick your poison. Like, do you want him to handle the ball, have like a 30% usage rate, and give you a chance to win, or do you want someone else handling the ball at the end of the day?
Yeah, and I hope, because like you mentioned LaMelo and Trey, and this is something that like I kind of been thinking about, and I don't know if it's something you really want to go into too much, but I was looking at, there's been a lot of talk of like who's the most underrated player in the NBA, and Trey gets a lot of talk for that, right? And I think yes, he is incredibly underrated, and I think LaMelo also, especially his is mostly just because of the amount of time he's lost to injury. But those are two players who are super high usage that haven't experienced much winning. Trey, outside of like, the 21-22 season, or I'm sorry, the 2021 season, where they made the conference finals, like those are two players that haven't really experienced a lot of winning thus far. And I would hate for Cade, and this is not to say like either of these players are like, bad scenarios at all. Like these are all-star players. LaMelo, I've always been high on. Trey, I've always been a really big fan of. Like, I don't think either of their predicaments are their fault necessarily, but I would hate for Cade to get stuck in those discussions of like, Trey and LaMelo in terms of like high usage, high turnover, and then also not really experiencing much winning, where they get thrown into like that underrated discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to see Cade maybe go from that discussion to maybe like a Shea, you know what I mean? Like go into that tier versus the LaMelo and Trey tier of high usage and high turnover. I really think getting the turnovers down is going to be the key to like leaving this state of just being undervalued and underappreciated because of like the team you're on and because of the turnovers, because that's always something people, the advanced stats community that hates Cade for some reason. They always point to the turnovers for like, well, his turnovers are super high, so he literally is not contributing to winning. Like that's just something that like I really need him to get off of his record so he can just get out of those types of discussions.
Yeah, those discussions are just like, I don't even reply to them because it's like they're like on my Twitter right now, like there's an ongoing discussion since opening night about plus minus. They're still going to this day. Like I have like plus 100 notifications on Twitter. Two people that don't even follow me, by the way. So it's even 10 times more weird. So they're like arguing about plus minus of how it's a broken stat, how it's just a box watcher stat, a box score a stat. I guess I was just like, man, this is like I don't care about that. I like the eye test more, but and hopefully he doesn't kind of get looped into like that Trae Young, the LaMelo Ball discussions. I think if you were to bring in kind of like a 1B to Cade, a guy that could be that second option. Obviously, we want Jaden Ivey or Tobias Harris to be that second option, but maybe kind of more of like a veteran presence. Maybe it could be a Malik Beasley. Who knows? I was thinking of Donovan Mitchell's rookie year and how he had Joe Johnson, and like how that was just like a veteran presence that he could lean on. I think Cade needs to kind of lean on his veterans more. Don't feel like you have to do it all by yourself. Lean on Tobias Harris more. Lean on Tim Hardaway Jr. more. Like lean on Malik Beasley more. These guys want to win just as bad as you do. I kind of feel like sometimes he gets tunnel vision in a sense, and he feels like he has to make all the plays. He's got to score all the points. And I think at the end of the day, once he can trust his teammates more, and who could blame him last year, man? Like some of the spacing around him last year, like I probably wouldn't pass the ball either. But some of the players that Trajan has brought in, they can help him score and put the ball in the basket, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's almost like he has basketball PTSD out there. Like you can tell, like sometimes like there'll be like a guy open in the corner and he's not even looking their way and he's going straight into like two defenders in the paint. Granted, he's been finishing at a lot higher of a percentage this year, closer to the basket, and I think that's also been a major improvement for him that I've been really impressed by. But at the same time, that tunnel vision is something that causes those turnovers. That you and I were just discussing, that like I feel like once he does start relying more on the veterans, and I think also once the veterans, it's just I think once they start playing their roles a little more tightly, if that makes sense. Like I don't, with all due respect, I don't want to see Tim Hardaway catching the ball in the corner and then driving to the basket and then having to make a decision when a defender steps up on him, where like he's in midair and then like kicking it out and then that's a bad pass. That's just not his game, and that's not benefiting the team in any way, shape, or form. Where if you're throwing the ball to Tim Hardaway, you either want him to shoot it or you want him to kick it. That's it. You know what I mean? Like I don't really want to see much on-ball creation from a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr. when you have him as a three-point specialist for that exact reason. So I think it's gonna take trust on both ends. I remember I read an article from The Athletic. I apologize, don't remember who the author was. It's not the new Pistons beat writer. It was just before he was announced. But there was an article where like, they talked to Malik Beasley about, coming in and playing with Cade. And, this was something that I even asked Malik Beasley about on Media Day, where it was like, how do you see yourself fitting next to Cade? And, kind of ushered the same sentiments of like, I'm excited to be a guy that, he can rely on, like he hasn't really had that thus far. Then in the Athletic article, he mentioned like that Cade said that he had never really felt like the floor was this open for him when they were practicing together. Like he had never really had this thus far. So it's almost like an adjustment for him getting to have an open court that like he can kick the ball out to guys he can trust to shoot it. And you can tell that's still a barrier in his head. So I think, a lot of this is, with time and gelling and all that. I do have faith that, it'll come around, but it's just going to take trust on both ends.
Yeah, like I said, it's a learning curve at the end of the day, and it's not really his fault. I'm not like making excuses for him, but I mean, when you go from like no spacing to somewhat good spacing, it's probably kind of like whoa, like they're that wide open, like holy crap! Like some of the just actions that Malik Beasley comes off and curls on the screen. It reminds me of Wayne Ellington. I don't know if you remember him during the BG
Oh
era.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, the golden arm. Like honestly, like I think Cade will get better with the turnovers over time. I don't think he's gonna be like a 5-6 turnover game guard. I think getting the system, learning JB Bickerstaff's offense, learning like where THJ and Malik and Tobias like the ball. I think it's still a learning curve at the end of the day. And we're only 3 games into the season. We're already talking about like, should we be concerned with this?